In this video, we're going to talk about numbers. Now, our previous videos have all dealt with words and guessing words, even when we were using the if and while loop. So in this example, we're going to start off with a random number. So for example, if I was to say my number equals, now let's just invent a number, which is going to be the number 5. We can now continue with a game that has to guess that number, but you'll realize that this game is really boring because you only have one number. So wouldn't it be cool if we could get the computer to think of a number itself and make it random so it wasn't the same every time? So let's go with that idea. So the first line of our program is going to read import and random. Now this is a very important part of Python because what we're going to do is ask Python to make a random number, and the only way we can do that is tell Python to bring in this thing called random, which lets it choose random numbers. Our second line is actually going to be the my number, but instead of choosing a number, we're going to say the number is a random dot rand int. Now int stands for integer, which means a whole number like 1, 2, 3, 4, so no decimal places. We open a bracket and then we say our lowest number is going to be a 1, comma, our highest number is going to be a 10. So basically what we're saying is think of a random number between 1 and 10, and that's it. So if we were to now just very simply print out my number, so if we run this, you'll see that we get a 10. And if I run it again, we'll get an 8, and so on and so on. So every time I run this, it will randomly generate a number between 1 and 10. So that's already a good start to the game, because what that means is that if we were to now make a game, the game itself would be thinking of a random number, so it makes it a lot more exciting. So let's go with that. I'm going to leave the print number up here because it's useful to see what the number is while we're still checking the game and see if there's any errors in there. So let's kind of go the same way we did with the word guessing game, which is going to be my guess equals. Now in this case, I would like to guess a number that is not between 1 and 10. So I'm going to write 11. What that means is when the game starts, my guess is going to be wrong. And this is important, just like the last time, because we're going to write a while loop. And we're going to say while my guess is not the same as my number, colon. And as you can see now, because my guess is already 11, it's already wrong, which means when the while loop starts, this is true. It's not the same as my number, which means that the while loop has to run. And the first line of our while loop, similar to what we did before, is going to be very simple. We're going to say my guess equals input, like we did last time, and we're going to open a bracket, and then we're going to say what number am I thinking of? Question mark. So that's how it's going to be. So I've only written one line in my while loop, which is the my guess input. So I'm just basically asking the player to input a number. Now, if we were to run this, the following will happen. Well, we know it's a 6 because we're printing my number. So we can already see, well, let's just type in a 4. And of course, the while loop is still running because every time my guess is not the same as my number, it will keep running the while loop. So let's do a couple more. Let's guess it's 5 or 7 or 6. Even though I typed a 6, and we can quite clearly see that the random number was a 6, Python is not accepting my number 6 as the answer. And there's a really obvious but kind of not so obvious reason for this. And the reason for this is over here I've put input, and what I've done is put a quotation mark. So what's happening here is an input, when you put like this, is simply waiting for you to type in letters. Now what does that mean? What that means is if I typed in the word cat or dog, they're made up of letters. But in this case, if I type in a number 4, 5 or 6 or a 7 or any number, Python is going to treat them like they're letters, not like they're numbers. And this is a really important point to remember. So in this case, my guess has to actually be a number, not a piece of typing or a letter. So in this case, what we're going to do is say my guess equals int, that's integer for number, brackets, and then I'm going to put a second bracket at the end there. So what I'm saying is my guess is an input, but it has to be a number now. So let's run this program again. So you can see that the number 4 is randomly generated. I'll type in a number 3. The loop still runs. I'll type in a number 5. The loop still runs. If I type in a number 4, you can see that the while loop is broken because, of course, 4 is equal to the random number, which was a 4. So in this case, int, the integer, the number that I guessed, is the same, which means that this while loop now breaks. So if we want to make this into a slightly nicer game, so what I'm going to say is if my guess is not the same as my number, colon, print, bad luck, try again, something like this. And then of course, I'm going to put in the else, print, good, you guessed correctly. Something like that. So let's run this program and see what happens. So you can see that my number is obviously a 1. What number am I thinking of? 4, bad luck. 7, bad luck. 9, bad luck. 1, good, you guessed correctly. So in this way, what we can do is generate our random numbers, which is really important in programming. We can run our while loop. And the most important point to remember here is we had to change the input itself. The whole of the input had to be turned into an int input. In other words, a number input rather than writing input.